Hi, Widespeed subscribers, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is our first class in a glass, and I am thrilled that you're here. Tonight, we're going to talk about wine and language. And, wine language is often ridiculed. So we're going to examine that. I encourage your questions and comments, by the way. Please put them in the chat versus the question area. And thanks for jumping on. I see a lot of people jumping on the chat now. So you may remember that classic New Yorker cartoon, right? Where the caption is, "It's a precocious little wine and its silkiness is alluring." I mean, I got a lot of play when it first came out many years ago, but I guess the question is, are wine descriptions just a bunch of inflated terms and fanciful words? As you might expect, I have a viewpoint on this. So let's consider why wine needs to be described in the first place. And I think the answer is it's not for anybody else. It's for you. The way memory works, we need to tell ourselves something in order to have something to remember. If you don't tell yourself something about a wine, you in effect have nothing to remember. And then when you go on wine.com or you're standing in a retail store looking at a wall of 500 wines, your mind is completely blank. So wine descriptions are important not for everybody else. They're important for you as a way to build a mental library of experiences and impressions that make your wine life, in a sense, not only more memorable, but richer. So, a wine description doesn't even need to make sense to anybody else. When you describe a wine as, I don't know, puppy's breath, the only person that matters is you. You'll always remember that wine. Let's consider how wine is or can be described for a moment. If I say, and I want to use food as a bit of a comparison here. If I say steak, pork chops, and chicken, you don't need someone to put down in front of you steak, pork chops, and chicken. You can taste those things very accurately just by imagining them. You can taste them in your mind. But if I say Pinot Blanc, Chenin Blanc, and Sauvignon Blanc, probably far fewer people can accurately taste those in their mind as they can taste steak, pork chops, and chicken. Why would that be? Why does it seem as if there's no accurate, reliable language to describe wine? Linguists point out that language does describe other things quite well. It describes shape, size, color, and spatial relationships really well. If I say that right here in front of me, there's a blue plate, 6 inches by 6 inches, and on it is a scoop of lemon sorbet, which is 1.5 inches in diameter and round. And beside the lemon sorbet, or around the lemon sorbet, there are 8 half-inch by half-inch cubes of pineapple. You may never even see that dessert, but you can visualize it really well and have an understanding of it through that visualization. But if I say a wine is elegant, it's hard to know what I mean by that. And you may not mean by the word elegant exactly what I mean. Wine is, unlike food, not its own language. And that's the crux of the issue. Let me explain that a little bit more. So with food, if you give someone, let's say, a strawberry, and you say, here's a strawberry, what does it taste like? Someone tastes it, they say, it tastes like a strawberry. Great, we're all agreed. It is a strawberry, it tastes like a strawberry, we call that strawberryness, and we're done. We're all on the same page. But if you hand someone a glass of Vernaccia and you say, what does this taste like? And they say, it tastes like Vernaccia, it's kind of not helpful, right? Because Wine is not its own inherent language, and food is. So with wine, we're forced to use metaphor or simile. We have to say what wine is like. It has to be like something. It has to be like lemons or cherries or chocolate or cowboy boots. I don't know, but it has to be like something in order for that experience to attempt to be shared. And because wine is not its own inherent language, most of us not only describe wine according to metaphor and simile, but it's no surprise that wine writers like me kind of over time develop their own language, sometimes fanciful, sometimes a little over the top maybe, to describe wine. And yet, if you describe a wine as, let's say, powerful and massive and maybe really soft, at least that does orient another taster at least a little bit. To say it's soft as flannel pajamas is just one step closer in an attempt to give someone an idea of the experience of the wine. What I find most fascinating about wine descriptions, though, has to do with what linguists call semantic field theory. And that's the idea that when one word is used in a new way, all the words related to that original word also shift in possible meaning. So the best example of this is the use of words to describe wine that are related to the human body. A person can be muscular. The very first time a wine was described as muscular, it opened that whole world of body language as potential descriptors for wine. So today, of course, you hear wines described as sleek or lean or brawny or bosomy or any number of other descriptions that relate to the human body. So a final point that I'd like to make on this topic is that any world of metaphor works. And I'm going to relate the story of, relate this story. So every year I teach privately wine classes, and they're often for a group of couples. So a few years ago, I was teaching a private wine class. We met every month for about 6 months, and there were 3 couples. And on about the third wine class, we were tasting Bordeaux on that class. And I realized that one of the men, even when the discussion sort of got really going about the wines, this one man rarely talked. He rarely gave his impressions of a wine. So before this class, I said to myself, I'm going to ask Howard I'm going to really press on him a little bit tonight to encourage him to describe the wine. So we're on wine number 3. And I say, so Howard, what do you think about this wine? And he says, this wine is the cathedral at Chartres. The flying buttresses are the structure of the wine. And right through the middle of the wine is this firmness, like the transept in a church. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this man who's an architect is not writing cherries and chocolate. He's seeing every one of these wines as a building. It made perfect sense to me, not because it made sense to me in a way, but because it made sense that he would use a world of metaphors which were comfortable for him. And I said to him, so what about this wine though? Wine number 2. He said, oh, it's like a pup tent. I'm like, yes, right? This is perfect. So as you think about a language to use to describe wine, I think the key is to think about a world of metaphors, a world of similes that make sense to you. It doesn't make any difference if they make sense to anyone else. And you'll always remember wine better that way. I mean, I suppose we could all, and you see wine writers' notes sometimes that say medium body, high tannin, good fruit, good acidity. And I think to myself, this is such a shame, because no one will remember a note like that, even never mind a year from now. They'll barely remember it a week from now. So using metaphors that make sense to you is a critical idea. I remind you that you're going to take comments, so chat away if you would like. Lastly, I want to address the idea of whether or not certain words should be kind of axed from our vocabulary. Is it okay, for example, to describe a wine as sexy? There's been a lot written in the wine press anyway about this idea over the last, I would say, year. And in particular, some terms like masculine and feminine appear to be increasingly criticized as words that should not be used. Also words like exotic and sexy. I don't know. I guess I do know that language can be subtly and sometimes not so subtly used to sideline people, used to malign people, and I get that. But I think that in the world of wine, words that are used with positive intent, words that are used to attempt to expand our experience of a wine, that those are valuable words. So I worry that once we restrict language by shunning certain words that some people may find offensive, once we do that, we've taken a step on a road of no return. So for now, I'm on the side that says, don't tie anybody's hands. Let people describe wine however they might. Because I know, first of all, that however you describe wine is most important to you and only secondarily important to me. And even when you're a writer like me, how I describe a wine needs to have a freedom of expression behind it. I'm curious about your thoughts. So let's talk about this wine that we're having tonight, or at least that I'm having, and I'm hoping that some of you might be having as well. I'll hold up the bottle. This wine it looks like La Nerth, but it's actually pronounced La Nert, La Cassagne. It's a Côte d'Rhône village. I chose this because recently I've read two studies saying, in one study, that people, an enormous number of people under the age of 35 don't want to spend much more than $35 on a wine. Maybe your age is related to the amount of money you'll spend. And the second study suggested that most people, a vast majority of wine drinkers who drink wine frequently, don't want to spend much more than $50 on a bottle of wine. This wine is, I think, $25 or so. As a quick aside, a little side box on this. One of the things that, if you're a wine subscriber to WineSpeed, if you're a subscriber to WineSpeed, and I know you are, you know that I sometimes put the cost of a wine by the glass versus the cost of a wine by the bottle, because one day, this happened a few years ago, I was talking to
one of my editors of a magazine, and their headquarters in New York was based on Madison Avenue, And I had recommended a wine that was $40 a bottle. And so this editor said to me, "You've got to be crazy. Who spends $40 on a bottle of wine? That's way too much." And I paused for a minute and I said, let's see, your offices are on like Madison Avenue, right? Madison near 42nd. Yes, she says. I said, and like, what do you, I know editorial offices are always really busy and jam-packed. Like, are you a coffee drinker, a tea drinker? She says, coffee. How many coffees do you drink a day? 2. What does a Starbucks latte cost on Madison Avenue in New York? $7. I'm like, great. You know what? This wine is $5 a glass, maybe 6. Did I do my math right? But you get the point, right? Where we list prices for wine as a price by the bottle. But if you divide that by 5, which is how many glasses you have in the bottle, that's really more of a realistic idea of what that experience is going to cost. I'm always shocked that some of the most fabulous wines in the world can be had for $10, not that much more than the cost of a latte on Madison Avenue. So, La Nerte, Lake Cassagna, Côte de Rhône. I did not have particularly great expectations for this wine, and it is hitting the baseball right out of the park. This wine is so delicious. If you have it too, I'd be curious about your descriptions. But for me, one of the very first things I look for in wine is what I'll call a lit from within character, a sense that the wine has energy, has aliveness. And I'm sure that when I was younger, I went through the kind of schemata: where's the acid, where's the fruit, how's the tannin, how's the oak, et cetera, et cetera. I almost don't care anymore. Well, that may be overstating the case. But none of those things is as important as a sense of aliveness in wine. So that's the first thing that I'm looking for. And then I'm looking for the texture of the wine. This wine is just glides over the palate in this absolute, it's like silk rolling over your palate. It is incredibly lifted and flavorful and delicious. For me, full of Christmas spices I associate with Christmas. And then beautiful vanilla beans and cherries, as if you drenched cherries in some vanilla syrup. So, lit from within, silky, cherries drenched in vanilla. I don't think I need to go very much further to hopefully entice you to have it. So, let's see. Let me look at this chat. I couldn't find it in New Hampshire, although I've bought a Famille Perrin Coudelet de Beaucastel, Côte de Rhône. Is it similar? Yes, that wine is similar. Coudelet de Beaucastel is the Côte de Rhône, the kind of smaller wine, if you will, of Chateau Beaucastel, by the Perrin family, well established in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I think it's similar, but maybe not as good. In all honesty, I have felt that in the last few years, the Coudelet of Beaucastel has been a little less precise, a little bit more fuzzy. If flavor was a sound, then it would be a wine with a little bit more static. It's not quite as precise. It's not what I call church bell in the mountains kind of precision.
that that this Chateau Lannert has. But I'm glad you have Côte de Rome, because the fall, anywhere in the United States, except for maybe the deep south, the fall when it's cool out, it is the time for Côte de Rome. All right, everyone. I want to thank you again. If you have no more chats or questions, I want to thank you again so much for being WineSpeed subscribers. We really treasure you. We've got a lot of great WineSpeeds coming up later this fall. I've got a lot of blogs waiting to come out of my head and onto paper that I hope you all really enjoy. And of course, all of our, what we hope are great wine recommendations. I would say in our office where we taste about 2,000 wines a year, we often taste 40 or 50 wines before we recommend our wine to know each week for you. And I know some of you order that wine every single week, so thank you for that. I'll see you next week in WineSpeed, at least on paper. And thanks again for watching. See you next time.